Well, hello, you beautiful human being. It's Tina Konstant here, and welcome to Waffle-Free Storytelling. So, as always, you know that all the waffle is down in the show notes, or drop round to www.tinakonstant.com where you can get it all. But in the meantime, we are leaping right into this week's story, which is called Fire and Ice. Now, Nimon had watched her grandfather her whole life. He had grown old, she thought, sitting by the fireside telling story after story. Some may be true, but most were probably not. You know, she could never be sure. They always sounded real enough. But then all he had ever done, as far as she could remember, was sit in that chair, drink hot coffee in the morning and iced whiskey at night. It seemed impossible that he had done all the things that he had talked about, that he had been on all of those wild and crazy adventures that took him to the tops of mountains and to the bottom of valleys and into the very center of the earth. And so she let that version of him go, and she just enjoyed the stories. And as she grew up and saw life and people more clearly, Nimon saw more and more that the great adventures her grandfather had brought to life at the fireside really were just fabrications and imaginings and entertainment. And that, she thought, was okay. Telling those stories lit a spark in him, and that's what she loved most. Fire and ice, he always said before he closed his eyes for a nap after a particularly crazy tale. Few things warm the heart than fire and ice. Then he'd smile and let his whiskey glass sag in his lap, and he'd start to snore. Nimon's granddad was 90 when he died. It was peaceful and quiet. He was in that chair by the fire, an empty glass in his hand. And it was on that day that Nimon swore her life would be more than just fireside stories. She'd live and she'd explore. All of the adventures her grandfather just talked about, she would actually do. And so it was on the day after the funeral that Nimon packed her bags, said goodbye to her family, and left. She didn't know where she was going. She didn't know what she was going to do. All she knew was that she wanted to see the world and be a part of everything. Where there was a battle to save seahorses, she leapt into the fray. Where trees were being planted, she didn't plant one. She planted 10,000. When she came to a mountain, she climbed it. When she found snow, she played in it. She met people from every nation, in every culture. She traveled north and south and east and west. She fell in love and she fell out of love. She lost and found precious things over and over. There was even the time she climbed to the center of the earth and found writing on a wall that someone had left before her. The words were carved into the rock. You had the courage to dig this deep, the word said. What you find, you get to keep. Well, Nimon had laughed. She searched that cave, but there was nothing much to find. There was no buried treasure or gold or silver or diamonds, but oh my goodness, she made the most remarkable friends on that trip, friends that stayed with her for life. In fact, that whole adventure was a crazy tale from start to finish. Then there was a time she snuck onto a ship because she had lost all her money playing poker and couldn't turn down a dare to get from Scotland to Greece without a ticket. By the time she got to Greece, she had learned how to play poker and was a rich woman. Oh my goodness, the stories from that voyage were epic. Or the time she almost lost a leg to a crocodile. She's got the scars to prove it. Oh lordy, that was That was another fine tale. But what Nimon always found odd and amusing was how often the people she bumped into and travelled with said, "You look familiar. Have we met?" Well, Nimon would say no. They would try to place each other for a while, give up, share a glass, get to know each other, make friends. So all in all, that was a good result. Years of adventure turned into decades. And every day Nimon thought of her granddad like he was travelling right there with her. So when the day came when Nimon found herself in a warm and cozy bar with a blazing fire, good food and great company, and someone said, "Nimon, tell us the story about the desert crossing where you met the mad king of coconuts." Well, Nimon had to laugh as she told the story of the time she spent in an oasis with a man who had found the place, stayed, gone mad, and built a city of which he was king. Now, if she had played her cards right, she could have been queen, but that man was crazier than a box of newts. Story after story. Every word was strange to the listener's ears, but every word was true. She looked at the faces around her and saw that some believed her, but most couldn't decide. And at the end of the night, the barkeep came over to the fire with a glass of whiskey. "I know why you're so familiar," he said. Then he took Nimon to a wall covered from floor to ceiling with photos of people who had travelled and ended up at that bar. Nimon stared in amazement when she saw photo after photo of her granddad. There he was, the man whose blood passed through her veins, the man whose stories had lit a fire in her heart and put her on the road. There he was on mountain tops, deep in snow, planting trees, fighting battles. There he was in the middle of the earth, carving words into the rock. The photo caught him carving the last letter of the words that Nimon felt were seared into her heart the first time she read them. "You had the courage to dig this deep. What you find, you get to keep." The barkeep handed Nimon a glass of whiskey. The ice clinked in the amber liquid and melted a little in the warmth of the fire. Nimon watched the ebb and the flow between the heat and the cold, and she finally understood what her grandfather meant. Fire and ice. Nimon sank into that chair and told another story. Every word was wild, every word was fantastic, but every word was true. And before she dozed off in front of the flames, she smiled and thought of her granddad. Fire and ice. Nothing warmed the heart better than fire and ice. Well, folks, there you go. That's it from Waffle-Free Storytelling for today. Think about your ancestors, or just even your parents and your grandparents. Who were they before they were mom and dad and gran and grandpa and aunt and uncle? Who are the unique and gifted and wild and incredible individuals that you might not even know because they were too busy being parents or grandparents? Gosh, what histories we've all got. Hey, so have a splendid week. Drop around to www.tinakonstant.com for all the waffle, for the Waffle-Free Storytelling shop, for the books, for the chat. Oh, there you go, just everything. So I look forward to seeing you there. Have yourself a completely gorgeous, gorgeous week, and I will see you next week for some more wild imaginings from the universe. Have a good one, folks. Bye-bye now. Hey. Biscuits later, Jack.